Good to be here with you.
Yeah.
Congrats on the Emmy and
Oh,
congrats on your new show. So exciting. Well deserved.
thank you so much. And, I got to say, congrats to you for staying on top of this. I think when you first started, who would have known that there would be so many things to cover? And I know we have a lot to dive into today. So let's get right into it. Up first, tell us all about the first one.
Yeah, so I wanted to just share a vanishing place, unfortunately, that just closed a couple months ago called Grumpy D's Coffee House. I think there's some visuals of it, but it was in the Crown Hill Ballard neighborhood. It was kind of like an old school bohemian coffee house that was a neighborhood gathering spot. They had a lot of open mics and live music that kind of brought folks of all ages. A lot of musicians had their first show there, also more established musicians, and it was, yeah, just a very well loved community spot. And yeah, it was proposed for redevelopment, the site that they were on, and the owners spent a couple years looking for a new space, but it just, it's hard to find a space that was big enough for the type of yeah, just shows and activities they had there. So they did, yeah, ultimately have to close after being open for about 10 years. So yeah, RIP Grumpy D's.
A Grumpy D's. And I had never been there, but I've heard about it for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Because again, these eclectic spaces, sometimes we don't understand the value of them until they're gone. And that's the unfortunate part. Tell us
Mm-hmm.
about the next one.
Yeah, so the next spot is Pike Place Magic Shop, and it's not vanished, and hopefully won't vanish, but they are looking for a new buyer. They've been around for about 50 years. It was founded in 1973 by Daryl Beckman, and yeah, it's the longest running magic shop in the Pacific Northwest and the last remaining one in Seattle. Just the go-to spot for local magicians, touring musicians. They've got all sorts of different gag gifts, juggling, magic, of course. Their back wall is lined with pictures of celebrity magicians and just their fans and followers. And when I posted about the magic shop, it's got a huge response. I mean, there's just so many people who grew up in Seattle that have memories of going there as kids and like getting gag gifts and whoopee cushions and invisible ink. So hopefully, the legacy of Pike Place Magic Shop can carry on because it's just such a uniquely kind of quirky, long-standing Seattle spot.
I mean, I think there's many of us who in our childhood, somebody gifted us with something that was very similar. You're talking about vanishing ink and all of these other things. I remember some of those things, these gag gifts when I was coming up, but also it's the wow factor of it all, right? Like there's something so literally magical, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a young person experiencing these things, because you may see a magic show and just be completely inspired by the fact that, whoa, these visuals are taking me somewhere that my brain cannot compute, right? Like, what is really going on? What am I seeing? How do people get engaged when we have opportunities like this? It's not vanished yet,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's still there's something happening here where we're kind of in that intermediary period. How do people get engaged? Because I feel like this is where people need to rally together to save our spaces like this.
Yeah, well, I think in the case of not just the magic shop, but a lot of places, there hasn't yet been a recovery from the pandemic, and especially downtown and the market. So, just making choices about where you spend your money and supporting small local businesses. And with the magic shop, I mean, just give them a call if you're interested in buying it and continuing that legacy. But yeah, those gag gifts are legendary, like the fake cigarettes and like
Yeah.
smoking those as a kid, and like people will be like, "Oh, what's up with these kids smoking
All
cigarettes?"
right.
And yeah, everyone who's worked there has been practicing magician, so it's just cool to see that there's this very like passionate community that's still um, practicing that craft. So yeah, very cool spot.
Oftentimes too, the thing is that it's people like them that keep the spirit alive and
Mm-hmm.
well, right? Because there's like a culture that gets built there. There's a almost cult following, right? Where it's like, hey, everybody who is doing something in that world knows the value of a shop like that. And so I think it is something when we talk about consumerism, how we spend our dollars to make sure that these spots stay open. But the fact that they're out here looking for a buyer, I always think, oh my goodness, opportunity for a campaign to collectivize
Mm-hmm.
voices, right? To like maybe push it up a level to the max, so that potential, we got a lot of money in this city,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of money, right? And so maybe there's some tech guru or something that loved magic as a kid that just didn't know about this opportunity, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I always think, well, how do we elevate the advocacy for spaces like this? That's my activism hat that comes on,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, people who care can
Mm-hmm.
pour into it, even if they can't, you know, um, buy the place, they can maybe make enough noise for the right buyer to show up.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think about this stuff a lot too. And I think there's a lot of yeah, creative approaches that have been used. Like maybe there's a group of magicians or just fans of the shop that could, collectively and cooperatively own the place and become, its stewards for the next generation. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of resources, both monetarily, but just also just kind of thinking outside of the box that can, keep these important spaces in place and in community for years to come.
Well, during your work here, just a little bit of a segue, have you been able to see that kind of resilience where people come together? I remember and I recall this, like there was a apartment building, right? And the apartment building was about to be up for sale. And all of the residents of the apartment building, I think it was on Capitol Hill, they all like came
Hmm.
together and were like, oh my gosh, they were like petitioning. They had these like digital petitions out. I remember signing it to be like, save this, space
Hmm.
for the residents. And then eventually it worked, right? And so that's just one example that I feel like I have, but you have this really direct purview of all of this work that's happening there with spaces that are vanishing, possibly vanishing.
Hmm.
Have you seen that kind of effort take shape and to maybe save some of these spaces?
Yeah, fortunately, I've seen a lot of that, which I think is really encouraging because sometimes it can feel overwhelming and like there's these larger forces at play that are very hard to overcome. But I mean, you might be thinking of La Quinta Apartments in
Yeah.
Capitol Hill,
Yeah.
and they had a successful campaign to landmark their building because I mean, they just had such a strong community there. So they were able to naturally organize and mount a campaign. um, I've seen that in efforts around like the Wood Tech Center and different Seattle Central college programs, workforce programs that are at risk of being cut, like the teachers and the students coming together to save those programs. The work of Africa Town, of
Yeah.
course. Um, yeah, lots of other cases. A Showbox, Queer the Land is another great queer and BIPOC driven effort to buy this 12-bedroom house in Beacon Hill and establish how they want to have their own self determination to live cooperatively and have shared ownership. So I think there's a lot of cases, but I think the common thread I see in all of them is that people just come together and organize. Like they have to, care and put energy in and just not accept the way that we're told that things have to be, that
Yeah.
another world is possible and they are able to manifest and realize that. And I find that very powerful and very inspiring. So I hope people can, see that and replicate it and, keep that going because we need more of it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you for diving into that. And I know it's a bit of a segue, but I feel like people need to understand that all hope is not lost when we
Mhm.
talk about these spaces, right? That, yes, you mentioned Grumpy D's, the doors are already shut. Okay, that's one way. But when we talk about opportunities like this space here, this magic shop, wow, we can open it up. And I think people sometimes need to hear that there have been successes in that regard,
Mhm.
because oftentimes that's what fuels the next person to be like, man, we could do this too.
Mhm.
There's enough of us that we can pull it together or bring more people in. So I just appreciate you diving into that. What's the next
Yeah.
space that's on the list for Vanishing Seattle today?
Yeah, so I wanted to bring in a little bit of really awesome local queer history, which I mean, one of the things that I love about running Vanishing Seattle is that I get to learn so much just from, not only researching, but just like talking to people who, tell me about stuff. And then I kind of follow like down the rabbit hole and yeah, just find all this cool, inspiring stuff about our local history. So this is a group called Z Whiz Kids, which was a queer countercultural performance art collective that was founded here in 1969. And they ran through about 1974. And basically, they did like guerrilla street theater. They performed at bus stops and grocery stores and on the streets. Eventually grew in popularity and did over like 100 musical reviews and performances. And it culminated in opening for Alice Cooper at the Paramount in
Wow.
1971. And yeah, they were just, really wild and creative and very queer and in your face. And apparently they managed to even freak out Alice Cooper. It was like, you all scare me, I'm never going to perform with you again. And they were based in the basement of the Smith Tower, which was called I think the Sub Room. And it was a mob run club at the time where they sold submachine guns, but it was also like this hangout for drag queens. And that's kind of where their performance space and the rehearsal space was based out of. So they were only around for about 5 years. Some of the members moved to New York and got involved in the emerging punk scene at CBGB's, and then moved back and established the Tupperwares, which played what's considered the first Seattle punk show, I think in 1976. Another member founded the Lude, which is another considered one of Seattle's very first punk bands. And then a lot of the members came on to work for One Reel and Teatro Zanzani and different, theater and music and art companies. So their influence just on the local music and punk and grunge and art and theater and like subculture scene, I think had just reverberated and is, very powerful and still seen today. So yeah, I thought that was just a really cool slice of local history.
That really is cool. And this is exactly why people say Seattle is so eclectic, right? We're so unique here because, where else do you really hear a story like that where, they expand across the country, come back, still have an impact, doing different things. And for anybody out there who has experienced like Teatro Zanzani, when you say that, I'm like, that is a whole experience, right? And so I love that piece of history could be shared here today. Thank you for bringing that to bear because, all things are not bleak, right? The idea that we have such a rich culture and history here in so many different sectors is one of the things that I really love about our city in Seattle and really throughout King County and Western Washington, to be exact, because to be honest, I hear about things all the way in Pierce County, Snohomish, where it's like echoing very similar characteristics to what you just described. So that's beautiful right there.
Yeah, we have a rich heritage. So
Yeah, there it is. You have another queer space, right?
Yeah, so I always like to include, some not vanishing spaces that are, here and thriving and that folks can go and support. So one queer-owned business is Mellow Cafe, which I know you're, very familiar with and a fan of. That's on 25th and Union, owned by Ambrosia Austin. And I think that opened in early 2021, but just incredible, amazing cold pressed juices, um, waffle breakfast sandwiches, which are delicious. And yeah, Ambrosia, just when you go there, you can see the relationships that Ambrosia has fostered with her customers and regulars. And so it's really great to see them intentionally holding it down in that spot and in the central district. So yeah, Mellow Cafe, highly recommend. Yeah, awesome spot.
Yeah, I highly recommend it as well. I love their juices and I tend to go there pretty regularly. Shout out to you, Ambrosia. You know what it is. But I really appreciate that there is Black owned businesses up and down Union, which really was a staple for me growing up. And I told Ambrosia I lived on 25th between Pike and Pine, so I'd walk past 25th and Union every day going to Garfield. I just walk right down 25th. So for me to see that spot there, and to be able to be a customer and, I definitely have my punch card. So you get a little punch card too, and you can get discounts. Amazing space. And there's one more you have.
Yeah. And I'll just say really quickly, I think it's another example of like community, like coming together to ensure like a space remains in for community, because before that, folks may remember, it was Cartona Cafe for about a decade, owned by Ice Dean. And like she was a big fan of Mellow. And then when she moved, like intentionally wanted to pass that space on to Ambrosia. So, and another Black owned, women owned, queer owned business. So it's awesome to see that happen in a community. But yeah, so the other not vanishing Small business I wanted to highlight is Florentino's Fine Flowers. Relatively new, about to celebrate their 1 year anniversary. They're in Madison Valley, and it's owned by Tino Umali, who is a fellow Garfield grad. Go
Woohoo!
Bulldogs!
Go Bulldogs!
And yeah, Tino has worked as a florist for over 20 years. Worked downtown, has been, gardening and doing floral arrangements since he was a kid, and shared the space with another Garfield grad, Jen Coyano, who had the Hella Happy shop there. And then, yeah, now has that entire space as of a few months ago. And yeah, just does beautiful custom floral arrangements, cultivates a very like warm, welcoming vibe. Also has a lot of really cool gifts and stuff. So if I'm looking for, a gift for someone or plants, there's also like a little Seattle focused section of the shop with books and things. Yeah, just a great place to go, and also going to be doing some upcoming events with like Rock LaRue and the other small businesses there. So yeah, Florentino's, that's a great queer-owned business to check out as well.
Madison Valley. I have to get down there. I mean, I love hearing about these spaces that we can go and support because, as we know, small business is still such a backbone of American economy. And the fact that we have such amazing small businesses here, to support, to get to know, right? Know the owners, build those relationships. That for me is always everything. So I just appreciate your insight always. I can't wait for you to come back on the day with Trae. Thank you for joining me in the lovely McCall Hall, by the way. I mean, it's beautiful here. So glad that you were able to bring those bits of Seattle history and, new spaces that we can actually patron, we can continue to patron. Thank you so much, as always. We appreciate your work with Vanishing Seattle. Stay on it because, we're going to be coming for you for the updates. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Trae. Appreciate your support, and thanks for having me. Thanks for Call Hall. Yeah, love being here with you. So appreciate everything that you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my goodness, you guys. There it is. We have started the show off nice and right. Cynthia Brothers just gave us a real dose of Seattle. We heard about Grumpy D's that unfortunately had to close its doors, but we also heard about some amazing spaces that we can continue to patron. So let's get down there to the pier, to the magic shop. Let's get to Mellow Cafe and Florentino's. You guys, make sure you guys check out Vanishing Seattle. I'm going to give it back to her so that she can tell y'all where to find her.
Oh yeah. So thanks, Trae. I'm like, should I exit stage left? Yeah, you can, just find me at Vanishing Seattle on Instagram and Facebook. Feel free to message me any pictures or stories or things that you see going on in your neighborhood. I have a lot of interaction from followers, and that's also how I'm able to, yeah, just get information and memories and kind of stay connected. So it's really a collaborative effort. So yeah, feel free to reach out at Vanishing Seattle.
There it is. Couldn't end without doing that and making sure we get